They told the whole city that Lazzaro Marchetti was finished, a wreck on the coast road they said he was lucky to walk away from, except he didn't walk away from it at all. 8 weeks in a private ward. A wheelchair with a sheepskin cushion, and 2 dark eyes that no longer followed the light. Within a month, his fiancée had emptied her side of the closet, his cousin had settled into the chair at the head of the long table, and his own soldiers had stopped lowering their voices when they walked past his room. Everyone left him. Everyone except the woman they paid to scrub his floors. What none of them understood, what she wouldn't understand until it was far too late to run, was that the blind, broken man slumped in the corner could see every single one of them. He could see the contempt in their faces and the greed in their hands, and the exact moment each of them decided he was already dead, and he was keeping score. The mansion smelled of lilies and lies. Fresh arrangements arrived every Tuesday, white and funeral sweet, replaced before they could brown. Lazzaro had decided weeks ago that the smell was deliberate, that someone in his household wanted the house to feel like a wake while its owner was still breathing in it. He sat where they parked him each morning in the bay window of the east drawing room, a tartan blanket folded over knees that worked perfectly well, and he let the lilies tell him everything he needed to know about the people who had buried him. To anyone watching, he was a ruin. 41 years old and folded into a chair, his head tipped slightly toward a window he supposedly could not see through, his eyes hidden behind a pair of heavy smoked glass lenses. The doctors had shaved a strip above his left ear to reach the swelling after the blast, and the hair had grown back wrong, threaded with new silver. His hands lay open and still on the blanket. He had practiced that stillness for months. Stillness was the hardest part. A dangerous man's hands always want to move. But Lazzaro Marchetti could see. He could see the way the morning light fell in gold bars across the parquet. He could see the maid's shoes and the soldier's shoes and which of them slowed outside his door to listen. He could see, and he could feel, his own legs perfectly, every muscle coiled and waiting beneath that ridiculous blanket. And he had let 4 months pass without letting a single soul find out. The bomb had been real. The 3 weeks he had genuinely lost had been real. He remembered almost nothing of them. A smear of antiseptic light, a tube down his throat, a voice that turned out to be a stranger's. But the morning his vision swam back into focus, in that hospital bed, he had done the only intelligent thing a man can do when someone he trusts has just tried to erase him. He had kept his eyes shut and listened. Within a day, he had heard his cousin Dario on the phone in the corridor, voice low and pleased, telling someone that the seat was finally open. Within a week he had understood that the bomb had not come from a rival at all. It had come from inside his own walls. So Lazzaro had decided to stay dead while remaining alive. He would be the helpless thing in the corner, the broken king, and he would let the rats grow bold and careless and visible. A blind man, after all, is the safest audience in the world. People say anything in front of a man who cannot see them. They forget he is in the room. They forget he was ever a person at all. It had cost him more than he would ever admit. There were nights he lay in the dark and catalogued the things he could no longer do without giving himself away, could not read, could not pace, could not look a man in the eye and watch him flinch. He had built his whole life on being the most dangerous presence in any room, and he had traded all of it for the privilege of being underestimated. Some mornings, the bargain felt like genius. Some mornings, it felt like he had simply agreed to die slowly so that he could watch. "He doesn't even turn his head anymore," said a voice from the doorway. Renata. The faint, expensive cloud of her perfume reached him a half-second before her words did, the way it always had. Once that scent had meant warmth. Now it meant inventory. She was here to take something. "It's like talking to furniture, Dario. I can't do it. I won't be a nurse." "No one's asking you to be," his cousin's voice, smooth, careless, already sounding like an owner. "I'm asking you to be patient. The lawyers are slow. Once the medical board signs the incapacity ruling, Everything moves to me and you and I. A pause. The brush of a hand somewhere it should not be. We won't have to be patient about anything. Lazaro kept his face turned to the glass and felt nothing move in it. Not a muscle. He had loved Renata in the cold transactional way that men in his world were permitted to love. He had given her a ring the size of a knuckle. And here she was, 6 feet from the man she had promised to marry, deciding which of his belongings to keep. "What about the ring?" Renata said, as if she'd heard the thought. There was a small, careless laugh in her voice. "It looks absurd, me wearing it while he sits there, like I'm widowed already." A rustle of fabric. Lazaro heard the faint click of metal set down on the marble side table, 3 feet from his hand, close enough that he could have closed his fingers around it. "There. I'll put it back on when there's a reason to." A funeral, say. Widows are allowed to be sentimental. "You're a cold creature," Dario said, admiring. "I learned it from the company I keep." The smoked lenses were a mercy. They hid the only part of him he could not fully control. He looked at the ring sitting on the marble, the thing he had once believed, sealed an alliance, a future, a version of his life, and he felt the last warm thing in his chest go quietly cold and clean, like water freezing over. He did not mourn her. That surprised him. He simply added her name to the ledger and moved on. Footsteps. A third set, heavier, deliberate. The soft-souled tread of a man who knew how to move quietly and did not bother to hear, because here did not matter anymore. Dr. Farrow. Lazaro knew the doctor by the click of his bag's clasp and the sour mint smell of the lozenges he sucked to cover the gin. "Well?" Dario asked. "It's heirs, I told the board." Farrow's voice carried the bored confidence of a man reading from a script he had written himself. "Optic damage, spinal trauma. There will be no meaningful recovery. He may live another 20 years like this, or he may not wake one morning. Either outcome," the clasp clicked shut, "is consistent with his injuries. No one will ask questions." Lazaro turned the sentence over slowly, the way he used to turn a coin between his fingers in the old life. It was not a prognosis, it was a permission slip. Farrow had just told the room, in the gentlest possible language, that whenever they decided to finish the job, the paperwork would already agree with them, so that was the shape of it. Renata had chosen. Dario had chosen. The empire he had spent 20 years building was being signed away in a sunlit room, while its founder sat 3 feet from the pen, close enough to smell the gin under the mint, close enough to take the doctor's throat in one hand if his hands had been allowed to move. He had wondered, in his worst hours, whether anyone in the entire household would choose him. That was the morning he got his answer, though it did not come from anyone in that room. It came from the hallway, where a new pair of shoes had stopped just outside the door and stayed there a beat too long. Her name was Calla Wren, and she had been in the house 11 days. Lazaro knew this because he kept a ledger. Now, the way he had once kept ledgers of debts and territories, except this one, lived only in his head, and it tracked something he had never bothered to measure before: kindness. Who withheld it? Who performed it for an audience and let it drop the moment they thought no one could see? Almost no one in the house scored at all. The cook spat in the soup of a man she believed could not taste the insult. A guard named Tomas had taken to flicking the back of Lazaro's ear as he passed, the way a boy torments a tethered animal just to prove to himself that nothing would happen. The day nurse read magazines aloud to herself and timed her shifts by them, and once, when she thought the room was empty of anyone who counted, she had said to the wall, "God, I hope he goes soon, I can't stand the smell of him." Lazaro had filed each of them away without heat. A ledger does not get angry, it only records. Calla had been hired through an agency to replace 2 staff who had quietly resigned. Staff who, Lazaro suspected, had been paid to resign, so that no one with old loyalty would be left in the rooms where decisions got made. She was meant to be invisible, a pair of hands, a new girl with no history and no allies. The safest kind of witness, which was exactly why Dario had approved her. She was not what Dario had pictured. Lazaro could tell that much from the way the soldier's conversation changed pitch whenever she crossed a room. A small dip, a beat of attention. She was a full-figured woman in her early 30s, soft and unhurried in a house full of sharp, hungry people. With dark hair she kept twisted off her neck, and a warmth in her movements that the marble corridors did not deserve. She wore the plain gray uniform, like it was an inconvenience she was too busy to resent. When she carried a tray, she carried it like the food on it mattered, and she talked to him. That was the thing, none of the others did. To the household, Lazaro was scenery, a chair with a man draped over it. They spoke about him, freely, the way Renata and Dario had that morning, as though blindness were the same as absence. But on her second day, Kala had set down his lunch tray, crouched so her voice would reach him at his own level, and said, conversationally, as if to an old friend, "It's chicken and rice again. I'm sorry. The kitchen makes everything the texture of wet paper because someone told them you can't manage anything else." A pause. "I don't believe them. You've got all your teeth, far as I can tell." He had nearly broken character and laughed. She did it every day after that, narrating the weather to him. "It's pouring out, the kind of rain that makes the gravel look like it's boiling." Complaining about the lilies, who keeps buying funeral flowers for a living man. It's morbid, not knowing how close she had cut to the truth. Telling him small, ordinary things about her mourning, the way you talk to someone you assume can hear you, and has simply lost the trick of answering. She never once raised her voice as though volume could reach a blind man, never once spoke to him in the slow, loud, careful tone the day nurse used, the tone people use for the very old and the nearly gone. She talked to him like a man. She had started peeling an orange for him in the afternoons, pressing the segments into his open palm one at a time, because, she said, the kitchen treats fruit like it's a luxury, and you like it's already dead, and both those things annoy me. The smell of split citrus would fill the drawing room, sharp and alive, against the lily's sweetness, and for the length of one orange, the house stopped smelling like his own funeral. He had not asked her to do any of it. There was no audience to perform for. No one was watching her be kind to the broken man in the corner, which meant, and this was the part that kept him awake, that the kindness was simply real unprofitable. Given to a person who, as far as she knew, could neither see her face nor remember her name, nor ever repay her a single thing. In his old life, Lazaro had a rule: anyone who is good to you for free wants something they have not named yet. He had built an empire on that rule. It had never once failed him. He kept waiting for Calla Wren to name her price. A word to the agency, a small theft, a favor asked in a low voice when the corridors were empty. She never did. What she did, instead, on the 11th day, was something far more dangerous. She had come in late, after the household had gone quiet, to collect the tray she had forgotten. He had heard her shoes on the parquet. He knew them now, a soft worn flat, with a loose left heel that ticked faintly against the floor, a small private sound he had come to listen for the way other men listen for a clock. He had assumed she would grab the tray and go. Instead, she stopped in front of his chair. He felt her studying him in the dark. He kept his eyes loose and unfocused behind the lenses, his breathing slow, the way he had trained himself, the picture of a man who has gone somewhere far inside himself and is not coming back. "You know what's strange?" she said quietly, almost to herself. "The light." Every nerve in Lazaro's body went still in a way that had nothing to do with his practiced stillness. "There's a candle on the mantel," she went on. "I lit it because the overheads in here are ugly and you can't see them anyway. So what does it matter? But when I moved it just now," he heard the small scrape of the brass holder sliding along stone, "your eyes moved. Just a little." They followed it. The silence in the room was total. Somewhere far off, the grandfather clock in the foyer counted seconds that suddenly felt enormous. She crouched, the loose heel ticking once against the floor, and brought her face close to his. He could smell the orange still on her fingers. When she spoke again, her voice had dropped lower, gentler, and entirely without fear, which was its own kind of impossible, because the people in this house were all afraid, every one of them, all the time, even the ones doing the frightening. "I won't tell anybody," Caloran whispered. "Whatever you're doing, whatever this is, a breath. But you should know they're not waiting 20 years, Mr. Marchetti. I've heard them in the kitchen." And for the first time in 4 months, behind the smoked glass, Lazzaro Marchetti let his eyes lift and lock directly onto another human being's. Lazzaro held her gaze for exactly 2 seconds. Then he let his eyes drift loose again, unfocused, sliding off her face toward the dead middle distance where a blind man's eyes are supposed to live. It cost him something to do it. After 4 months of speaking to no one, with anything but silence, the urge to answer her, to say one true sentence, to one person who had offered him an orange for free, was almost physical. He swallowed it. The first rule of staying buried is that you do not climb out of the grave for the first kind voice that passes by. Kindness could be a longer game than cruelty. He had played that game himself, more than once, on men who never saw a knife because they were too busy being grateful for the hand, so he gave her nothing. He sat like furniture and let the silence stretch until it became unbearable, and he listened to what she did with it. She did not push. That was the first thing that surprised him. A person running an angle fills a silence, presses, bargains, explains why you should trust them. Kala Ren just exhaled a small tired sound and stood. "All right," she murmured. "You don't know me from a stranger on the street. Fair enough. You'd be a fool to trust the new girl." The tray clinked as she lifted it. "I'll keep bringing the oranges anyway." The loose left heel ticked across the parquet. At the door she paused. "The candle stays lit," she said. "In case you like it." And she was gone. And the room smelled of citrus and snuffed wax, and Lazzaro Marchetti sat in the dark and understood that he had just failed, for the first time in his life, to predict another human being. He did not sleep that night. He sat in the chair. They wheeled him to and ran the household through his mind the way he had once run territories. Every person a piece, every piece a weight. The timeline was the problem. "They're not waiting 20 years, she had said. "I've heard them in the kitchen," and over the following days, listening with the cold patience he had perfected, he learned exactly how right she was. It began with the chess set. It had stood untouched on the side table by the window, for as long as he had been parked there, an heirloom in walnut and bone that his father had played on, that he had learned the family's real business across, move by move, as a boy. No one in the house played. It sat there, gathering the same weekly dust as the lilies. But on the 4th day after Kala caught his tail, Lazzaro heard Dario lift a piece, the small distinct knock of bone set back down on wood, and say to someone, idly, "I'll have this moved to my office. He's not using it." As if the board were already inherited. As if the man beside it were already in the ground. That was the temperature of the house now. They had stopped planning to take everything and started simply taking it, item by item, while he watched, the watch off his wrist. For safekeeping, the good whiskey from his study. A painting from the upstairs landing that Renata had always admired, gone one morning, and a paler rectangle of wallpaper left behind, like a headstone. Then came the betrayal he had not let himself expect, not because it surprised him, but because some childish corner of him had still been hoping. He heard Renata in the corridor with Dario, late, their voices loose with wine. "Show me," Dario said. And there was a soft click and a rustle, and Lazzaro understood with a flat interior drop that she had brought the ring to show his cousin, the ring she'd peeled off and left on the marble like a coat she was tired of. "It's vulgar," she said, delighted. He had no taste. He bought the biggest thing in the case and thought that was the same as choosing well. He thought everything worked that way. Biggest gun, biggest house, biggest stone. A pause. "I'm having it reset," I won't wear another man's apology on my hand, and if he lasts the 20 years. He won't, she said, and Lazaro heard her say it the way you'd say the weather won't hold. A small certainty, mildly inconvenient, already accounted for. He sat in the dark afterward and waited to feel rage, and what came instead was that clean cold, freezing over. Again, the last of something old, hardening into something usable. He had given that woman 4 years and a stone the size of a knuckle and the protection of his name, and she had handed it all to the man who'd put the bomb under his car, and she had done it laughing. Fine, he thought. Be in the room when I stand up. I want you to see it. Then came the matter of Anselm. Anselm Voss had run the household for 30 years. First for Lazaro's father, then for Lazaro. An old man with a spine, like a fireplace poker, and an unbendable, unfashionable loyalty to the name over whoever currently wore it. He was the last person in the building who still called Lazaro Sir, with meaning in it, who still came in each evening to describe the day's business in a low murmur to a man everyone else had written off, the price of grain at the docks, the weather who had asked after the master's health and whether they'd meant it. He did not know Lazaro could see. He simply refused to treat him as gone. On the 5th day, Anselm did not come. On the 6th, Lazaro heard why. Dario's voice in the corridor, flat with the boredom of a man who has already won. He's old. He's slow. He asks questions about the accounts that aren't his to ask. A pause. Pay him through the year and put him on the morning train. I don't want him in this house when the doctor signs the papers. When the doctor signs the papers. So Pharaoh's incapacity ruling was close. Days, not weeks. And once that pen touched paper, the law itself would agree that Lazzaro Marchetti no longer existed in any way that mattered, and there would be no one left in the walls who would object to making it literal. He heard Anselm leave the next morning. He knew the old man's tread, the slight drag of a bad hip, the careful pause at each stair. He heard it cross the foyer for the last time. He heard it stop, just for a moment, outside the drawing-room door. For one unbearable beat, Lazaro thought the old man would come in, thought he would have to sit there and give Anselm, of all people, the same dead stare he gave the rats. He did not know if he could, but Anselm only stood there. Then, very quietly, in a voice not meant to be answered, the old steward said through the door, "I'm sorry, sir, I'd have stayed if they'd let me." The bad hip dragged on. The front door opened and shut. A car took the last loyal man in the house, away down the gravel. And Lazzaro Marchetti was alone in a building full of people waiting for him to die. Every one of them. Every soldier and servant. And the woman who had worn his ring. Every one of them gone over to the other side. Every one. Except the loose left heel that ticked, faithfully, into the drawing room that same afternoon, carrying an orange and a complaint about the lilies, to sit with the only man in the house she had no reason on earth to sit with. It happened 4 nights later, and it happened fast, the way such things tend to. Lazaro had learned the rhythm of his own assassination before it arrived. Pharaoh had taken to coming in the evenings now, alone with the medical bag and its sour mint cloud, to check the patient, a phrase that fooled no one in a house where no one cared. Each visit, the doctor lingered a little longer at the IV stand they had installed beside the bed. The one that fed Lazaro, the mild sedatives that kept the invalid docile through the long nights. Lazaro had been quietly defeating those sedatives for weeks, palming the line's flow valve down a hair each evening once the doctor left, a trick that kept his blood clear and his mind sharp, while the bag emptied on schedule and lied to everyone who checked it. Each visit he listened to the clink of glass and the snap of a cap and counted the seconds the doctor's hands spent at the line. On the 4th night, the seconds got longer. He heard the bag open. He heard a vial he did not recognize, a different glass, a heavier stopper. He heard Pharaoh draw something into a syringe, and he heard the doctor murmur to himself, the private arithmetic of a careful man, respiratory, by morning. Consistent with the injuries, the permission slip being filled in at last. Lazaro lay in the dark with his eyes shut and made the coldest calculation of his life. If he moved now, if he broke 4 months of stillness to stop the needle, he revealed everything to the one man whose job was to make sure he died, in a room with no witnesses, while the household slept. He would survive the night, perhaps, but they would know, he could see, know he could move, and they would simply find a faster, surer way. And they would do it before the men, an hour outside the city, could ever reach him. The grave he had dug himself was meant to be climbed out of on his own terms, with the rats all in one room, and his own people, what was left of them, ready. Not like this. Not blind to his own resources. In the dark, against a single careful man with a heavy stoppered vial, he realized, perhaps, 4 seconds, to decide whether to die as a fraud or rise as one, and lose everything in the rising. He never had to choose. The door opened. Dr. Kala's voice, bright and ordinary and entirely out of place at that hour. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were in. The night girl's sick. They sent me up to sit with him." The loose heel ticked into the room, unhurried, toward the bed, toward the syringe. And Lazaro understood with a jolt of something close to terror that she was putting her soft, unguarded body directly between the needle and the man it was meant for, and she was doing it as though she had every right to. "This is a private examination," Pharaoh said. "Cold now. Get out, course. Just let me set this down." A small clatter. She had brought a tray? Of course she had. A cover for being anywhere. And then, in the same easy tone, the sentence that stopped the doctor's hand. "Funny, though. That's not the sedative. The sedative's the blue cap. I restocked the cabinet myself this morning. A beat. That one's not on his chart." Silence. The kind with a weight to it. Lazaro, eyes shut, every nerve screaming at him to move, heard the doctor recalculate. A maid who knew the difference between 2 vials was not a maid you killed a man in front of. A maid who had said it out loud, who could repeat it to a board, to a lawyer, to a policeman. She was a witness now, named and inconvenient. And Pharaoh was a careful man. Careful men do not improvise 2 bodies when they had planned for none. "I must have grabbed the wrong vial," Pharaoh said smoothly, and Lazaro heard the syringe go back into the bag, heard the heavy stopper seated, the evidence withdrawn. "It's late. I'll come in the morning." "I'll walk you down," Kala said sweetly. "These stairs are wicked in the dark." She walked the man who had come to kill him all the way to the door, chatting about the weather, and she did not let her voice shake once. When she came back, and she did come back, the heel ticking up the stairs again, 20 minutes later, she shut the door and crossed to the bed and stood over him in the dark. Lazaro lay perfectly still. He did not know, even now, whether she had understood what she had just walked into the middle of, or whether she had simply seen a vial out of place and a man too kind to be left to careless hands. Then she said, very low, not asking anything, just laying it down between them like the candle on the mantel, "I don't know what you did to make them hate you this much. I don't think I want to know a breath. But I'm not going to let them do it in front of me, so I'm going to sit in that chair tonight, and I'm going to be here in the morning when he comes back, and the morning after that." She sat, the chair creaked. After a while, soft and absent, not knowing she did it, she began to hum. A low, worn little melody, the kind a person learns at someone's bedside and never quite forgets. In the dark, behind eyes the whole world believed were dead, Lazaro Marchetti felt something he had not felt since before the bomb, since before the ring, since before any of it. He felt guarded. By the one person in the world who had nothing to gain from guarding him, and he made a decision that would burn his careful 4-month grave to the ground. He let 3 more days pass. He had to be sure of her and of himself. He watched her now the way he had once watched everything, with the full cold attention he had been hoarding behind the smoked glass. And the more he watched, the more the picture refused to add up the way pictures of people usually did. Kalaran was too calm, not cold, never cold. The warmth was real. He had staked his life on that. The night she stood between him and the needle. But underneath the warmth ran a steadiness that did not belong to an ordinary house servant who had stumbled into a den of killers. When Pharaoh had threatened her, her voice had not climbed. When a soldier cornered her in the pantry one afternoon, Lazaro heard it through the wall, the low, ugly cadence of a man enjoying a woman's fear. She had not given him any. She had said something quiet that Lazaro could not make out, and the soldier had laughed it off and left. And the strange thing, the thing that lodged in Lazaro's mind, like a splinter, was that she had sounded bored. Like a woman who had stood in front of worse men than this one and learned exactly how little it helped them to be afraid. And there was the humming, the same worn melody, always when she thought she was alone with the invalid. He had heard a tune like it once, long ago, in a hospital where his mother had died slowly and badly. The kind of song you hum at a bedside through the long, bad hours, to someone who is leaving, to keep yourself company while they go. You did not learn a song like that from an easy life. She had nursed someone. She had buried someone. She had been somewhere with violent men and survived it with her warmth intact, which was rarer and harder than surviving it with your warmth burned out. He did not know the shape of her yet. But he knew now that invisible new Maid was a costume, the same way the wheelchair was a costume. That Kalaran was a person wearing her plainness on purpose, and Lazaro of all men knew what it meant when someone did that. It should have made him trust her less. Instead, it did the opposite, because whatever she was hiding, she had spent it. Every bit of that hard-won steadiness on protecting a stranger she believed could give her nothing back. And that was when he saw the flaw in his own perfect grave. For 4 months, the plan had been flawless, precisely because Lazaro had nothing left to lose. A dead man can afford infinite patience. You cannot threaten a corpse. He had been willing to sit in that chair for a year, if it took a year, to let the rats grow fat and careless, until he could take them all at once, because the only life on a table was his own, and he had already mentally spent it. But the table had changed. There was someone else on it now. Pharaoh had withdrawn the needle that night, for one reason, a witness. Kala had made herself the thing standing between Lazaro and a quiet death, which meant that the moment the rats decided Lazaro had to go now, the witness went first. They would not kill him in front of her. They would simply make sure she was not there. An accident on the wicked dark stairs, she had warned the doctor about a dismissal. A car that did not arrive where it was meant to, a stretch of road. He knew exactly how it was done. He had ordered it done, in the old life, to people who had inconvenienced him far less than she was about to. His patience had become a weapon, pointed at the one person who did not deserve it. Every day, he stayed buried. He kept her standing in the blast radius of his own slow vengeance. The grave only protected a man with nothing to lose, and he was not that man anymore. It was a strange thing to discover at 41, in a chair, behind a dead man's eyes, that he had a thing left to lose. He had spent 2 decades making certain he never did. A man with nothing he cannot bear to part with cannot be threatened, cannot be bought, cannot be made to flinch. That had been the whole architecture of his survival, and it had worked, and it had left him sitting in a sunlit room, listening to the people he'd kept closest divide his belongings over his head. Kala had wandered into that fortress, carrying a tray, and an orange, and without the faintest idea she was doing it, had pulled out the one stone the whole structure had been built to avoid having. He should have hated her for it. Instead, he found he could not stop listening for the loose left heel. That evening, when the loose heel ticked into the drawing room and the smell of split citrus rose against the lilies, Kala crouched to press the first orange segment into his open palm, the way she had every afternoon since the second day. And Lazaro Marchetti closed his fingers around her hand. He felt her go still. He felt the small startled catch of her breath. He let his eyes, dark, clear, entirely focused, the eyes of a man who had been watching the whole world from inside a corpse for 4 months, lift and fix on hers in the candlelight. His name is Pharaoh, Lazaro said, in a voice rusted from disuse, but perfectly steady, perfectly alive. The doctor. When he comes tomorrow, I need you to do exactly what I tell you. A breath. Because they are going to try again. And this time, Kayla, they are going to come for you first. For a long moment, Kaya did not move. Her hand stayed inside his, warm and still, the orange forgotten between their fingers. When she finally spoke, her voice was not the bright, ordinary voice she used on the household. It was lower, older. "How long?" she said. Not how she had skipped past disbelief entirely. The way only someone who had already half known could. "How long have you been able to see me?" "Since the second day you came." He watched the candlelight move in her eyes. The orange. "You pressed it into my hand before I had reached for it. Nobody does that for a man they think is gone. I have been waiting 4 months for one person, in this house, to be real, and it turned out to be the maid they hired to make sure no one real was left. 4 months." She sat back on her heels, and he watched her run it backward. Every conversation held in front of the furniture, every careless cruelty spoken over his head, every time she had narrated the weather to a man she now knew had been watching her face the whole time. To her credit, she did not flinch from it. "You let them think it. Renata? Your cousin. You sat there and let your own fiancé plan around your body like you were a chair. She made it easy. They all did." He released her hand slowly, so she would know it was a choice and not a slip. "A blind man is the safest witness in the world. Kala. People confess to furniture. I have learned more in 4 months in this chair than I learned in 20 years at the head of that table. I know who took the contract on my car. I know who paid for it. I know the day they mean to make it permanent." His jaw tightened. "What I did not plan for was you. Don't." She stood abruptly and the loose heel ticked once as she turned away toward the window. He had unsettled her, the first time he had ever seen it. "Don't make me the thing that changed your mind." "I peeled an orange. That's all I did. You stood between a syringe and a man you thought could not even thank you for it." He let that sit. "I have spent my whole life around people who calculate. I know the look of it from across a room." "You did not calculate. That is the only reason I am telling you anything at all, and it is the exact reason you are now in more danger than I am." He leaned forward in the chair, and for the first time she saw the body under the blanket move the way it had always been able to. Deliberate, controlled, coiled. "Pharaoh pulled the needle the other night because you made yourself a witness. The moment Dario decides I die tonight, instead of next month, the witness dies first. You understand? Your kindness bought me time and spent your own safety to do it. I will not let that stand." She turned back. The candle threw half her face in gold, half in dark. "So what do you want from me?" "I want you to keep being exactly what they think you are," Lazaro said, "the invisible new girl. 1 more day. Pharaoh comes tomorrow evening to finish what he started. I have heard him moving. His schedule, he will not wait past tomorrow, now that he knows you are watching. He will find a way to send you out of the house first. An errand, a dismissal. Something that puts you on those stairs. Or in a car, alone." He held her eyes. "You are not going to go, and when he realizes I won't leave, then he will do it in front of you anyway. And deal with the witness after." A thin, cold smile. The first true expression his face had made in 4 months, and there was nothing kind in it, which is precisely what I want. Because tomorrow, Kala, when Pharaoh walks into this room with a full syringe and a clear conscience, and absolutely no idea that the corpse in the bed can see him, I am going to stop being dead. And I am going to need exactly one person in this house I can trust, standing behind me when I do. The grandfather clock counted in the foyer. Somewhere below, a soldier laughed at something. The lilies sat in their vase, white and waiting. "You're insane," Kella said softly. But she did not leave. She crossed back to him, crouched, and, deliberately, watching his face, pressed the next orange segment into his open palm. "All right, Mr. Marchetti. 1 more day." Her mouth curved, tired and unafraid. "But after tomorrow, You are going to tell me how a dead man plans to fight a house full of his own soldiers with nothing but a maid and a chess set he is not allowed to play. He almost let the smile reach his eyes. He did not tell her yet that he had been counting on the chess set all along. She came back after midnight, when the house had gone to sleep. Because there were things that could only be said in the dark, she brought no tray this time. She lit the candle on the mantel. The candle stays lit, in case you like it. And sat in the chair beside the bed, where the night girl was supposed to sit. And for a while, neither of them spoke. Lazaro had spent 4 months in silence. He understood that some silences were a kind of conversation. He let this one breathe. My mother died in a room like this, Calla said finally. Not as nice, but the same, the waiting. The people in the hall talking about you like you were already gone. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the candle. 6 years I nursed her. The cancer took the easy parts of her first and left the cruel parts for last. And the men in our life, a small, flat laugh, my father's kind of men. They did not wait for her to finish dying before they started dividing what little there was. I learned a great deal about people in that house, Mr. Marchetti. I learned that most of them show you exactly who they are the moment they think you cannot do anything about it. She turned the candle a quarter turn on the mantel, the same small scrape he had heard the night she caught his tell. You can't see them, they think. And to them, that is the same as you. Not being there, I knew the difference. I'd watched it from the other side of the bed for 6 years. So that was the shape of her. Not an operative, not a plant. A woman who had grown up among dangerous men and dying women, and had come out the far side with her warmth intact and her fear burned away, because she had already survived the worst thing the world had to offer, slowly, in a room like this one. And there was nothing left in a house full of soldiers that could frighten a person who had held her mother's hand through that. My father owed money to men who settle accounts with knives, she added almost idly, as if it were a small thing. By the end, I knew how to keep a calm face in front of a man deciding whether to hurt me. You learn that the fear only feeds them, so you put it somewhere they can't see, and you keep your hands busy, and you wait for them to get bored. They always get bored. She looked at the candle. I got very good at waiting for men to get bored. I suppose that is the whole of my talent. It is not the whole of it, Lazaro said quietly. The song, he went on after a moment. You hum it when you think you're alone. He felt her go still in the dark. Did I every night? A long pause. She liked it at the end, when she couldn't talk anymore. I'd hum it so she'd know I was still in the room. Her voice did not break, but it thinned, the way ice thins over deep water. I suppose I do it now without knowing. For anyone who seems, she stopped. Like they're leaving, Lazaro finished, like nobody's in the room with them. She looked at him, then fully, and the candlelight caught the wet shine she would not let fall. I wasn't going to let another person go out of the world with the hallway talking over them. I didn't care whose floors I was scrubbing. I'm sorry if that wrecked your beautiful 4-month plan. And Lazaro Marchetti, who had ordered men killed, who had built an empire on the rule that free kindness always hides a price, who had not been touched by another human being's hand in 4 months except to be moved like luggage, reached out in the dark, and found her face, and brushed his thumb once along the curve of her cheek. Catching the tear before it could fall, you didn't wreck it, he said. You're the only part of it that was ever worth keeping. She did not pull away. For a moment, the whole rotten house, the lilies and the rats and the syringe, waiting in a leather bag downstairs, simply ceased to exist, and there was only the candle and the orange scent on her fingers, and a dead man's hand, learning, very slowly. Then, from far below, a sound that should not have been there, the front door, a car on the gravel, a second car. Calla pulled back sharp. He's not coming tomorrow, she breathed. And Lazaro was already sitting upright in the bed, the invalid sloughing off him like a shedskin, every old instinct waking at once. Lazaro, he's coming now, and he is not coming alone. There is a particular calm, that comes over a certain kind of man when the waiting finally ends, and Lazzaro Marchetti felt it settle over him. Now, like a coat he had been cold without for 4 months. "Listen to me," he said, and his voice had changed entirely. It was the voice from the old life, the one that moved men, quiet and absolute. "Everything I am about to tell you, you do without arguing, because we have minutes, and I have had 4 months. Can you do that? Yes. Good." He swung his legs out of the bed, both of them, strong. The muscle he had kept secretly working through 4 months of stillness flexing under his weight, and stood for the first time in front of another living soul. Cala's breath caught, despite everything. A dead man, risen. 3 things you do not know about this house. 1. He crossed to the wall by the window, pressed a section of paneling that gave with a soft click, and drew out a flat black pistol and a phone, wrapped, hidden, waiting. "Since the 2nd week, I have not been idle in this chair. Anselm hid these for me before they sent him away. He is the only one I trusted with the truth, and he is the reason any of this works. Anselm." The old steward's quiet apology through the door, "I'd have stayed if they'd let me," had not been a goodbye at all. It had been a man making certain the weapons were in the wall before he walked out the front for the last time. The loyalty Lazzaro had thought was the only thing left in the house had not died. It had simply gone underground and put on a disguise of its own. 2. He pressed the phone into her hands. "There is one number saved in it. You send a single word, citrus, and nothing else. Send it now." She did not ask why. She sent it. Anselm took a list with him the morning they put him on the train. Names, accounts, the men in my organization who were never Dario's, who were only ever waiting for proof I was alive. He has spent these weeks quietly gathering them. They have been staged an hour outside the city for 3 days, since the day he learned the doctor was changing the vials. That word tells them the night has come. They are already moving. And 3. Kala whispered. Lazzaro went to the side table by the window, to the chess set in walnut and bone that no one was allowed to play, that Dario had tried to carry off as a trophy. He lifted the board. Beneath it, set into the hollow base his father had built for exactly this kind of night, was a second phone, older, and a single sheet of paper covered in his own cramped hand. 4 months of confessions, transcribed, every name, every date, the contract on his car traced back through Pharaoh's accounts to Dario's, and from Dario's to the rival family, the Sabatinis, who had fronted the money to set a careless cousin in a dead king's chair. "They thought the board was a trophy," Lazzaro said softly. "It is a recording. A small thing my father built into the base. It has been listening since the day they wheeled me in here, while they all confessed to the furniture." He almost laughed. He used to say the safest place to keep a secret is in plain sight, where proud men are too proud to look. Below, the cars had stopped. Doors. Below, the cars had stopped doors. The unmistakable weight of several men entering a house that believed itself already won. Too many of them for a doctor's quiet evening call. Dario had not come to watch a poisoning. He had come with soldiers, which meant Dario had decided that the patient's slowness was over, that tonight was the night the chair emptied, for good. "They've brought a crew," Calla said, listening at the door, her voice flat and steady in a way that confirmed everything Lazzaro had guessed about her. 4, maybe 5. "And Pharaoh. Then we changed the plan," Lazzaro said. He did not raise his voice. "We do not have the minutes I wanted. Anselm's men are coming, but they are not here. And 5 guns in this house right now is 4 more than I can take cleanly with 1. He pressed the older phone into the chess set's base and slid the board back over it, still recording. "So we buy time. The thing I am best at in all the world, Calla, is being underestimated. We are going to let them keep doing it for a few minutes more." He lowered himself back into the bed. He pulled the IV line back into the crook of his arm, drew the blanket up and palmed the pistol flat beneath the sheet against his thigh. He reached up and slid the smoked glass lenses back onto his face, and Kala watched the most dangerous man she had ever met fold himself, joint by joint, back into the shape of a corpse. "Whatever they say in here," he told her, his voice already going soft and far away. The voice of the invalid. "You keep your eyes down and your hands full. You are a maid who came to sit with a dying man and walked into something she does not understand. You are frightened, you are stupid with fear, let them believe it. It is the only armor you have until that door downstairs opens again." His hidden hand found hers under the edge of the blanket and pressed once hard. "When I sit up, you get behind me and you stay there. Not beside, behind. Tell me you understand." "I understand." "Say the other thing." A breath. "I held my mother's hand for 6 years," she whispered, and picked up the tray from the side table and turned herself back into furniture. A plain, frightened girl in a gray uniform, eyes down, hands full. "I can hold a few minutes more." Boots on the stairs, now. The sour mint cloud and the click of a leather clasp, and behind it the careless owning tread of Dario Marchetti, and behind that, the heavier spread-out footfalls of men who carried weapons for a living and were not trying to be quiet, because quiet was for houses that still belonged to someone else. The door handle turned. "Eyes down," Lazaro breathed, and went still. The door opened. Light from the hall spilled across the parquet and across the lilies white and funeral suite, and the chess set sitting innocent on its table, with 4 months of confessions humming inside it, and the broken blind king folded in his chair-shaped grave by the window. And the frightened girl beside him holding a tray she had no idea was the only thing in the room more dangerous than the man in the bed. Dario came in first, hands in his pockets. The easy stroll of a man walking through property he already owns. 2 soldiers filed in behind him and spread along the wall. Lazaro counted them by their boots without moving his head. A third stayed in the doorway. Pharaoh came last, the bag already open, the syringe already drawn. No pretense tonight of the wrong vial, no chart, no careful arithmetic. Just the needle and the clear bead swelling at its tip. And a doctor who had been told that the time for caution was over. "Let's not drag it out," Dario said, to the room in general. His gaze passed over Kala and dismissed her in the same motion. "The furniture and the girl who tends it. You, out. Go and count the silver. There's a good girl. You don't want to be in here for the next part." Kala kept her eyes on the floor, her hands tightened on the tray. "Course, sir," she said. Small, frightened, perfect. And she did not move toward the door. "I set out sharper now." One of the soldiers shifted off the wall. "She stays." 3 words, in a voice none of them had heard in 4 months, a voice that was supposed to be gone, broken, buried under spinal trauma and a doctor's signature, and the temperature of the room dropped to nothing. Lazaro Marchetti lifted his head. He reached up and drew the smoked glass lenses from his face, slowly, and let his cousin look into his eyes. Dark, clear, focused, seeing, for the first time since the bomb. He let the blanket slide from knees that worked perfectly well, and he stood unhurried, the way a man stands when he has all the time in the world and every other man in the room has just discovered he has none. "Hello, Dario," he said. The syringe trembled in Pharaoh's hand. Dario had gone, the gray of old ash, his easy stroll curdling into something stiff and backward-leaning. The owner's swagger draining out through the soles of his shoes. "You," he managed. "That's not, I can see you," Lazaro said, almost gently. "I have been able to see you for 4 months. I watched you sit in my chair at the head of my table. I watched you take my ring off Renata's finger and call it vulgar. I heard you tell this man that no one would ask questions." He took a step forward, and the pistol was in his hand now, drawn from beneath the blanket in one motion so smooth that the nearest soldier was still reaching for his own when he found himself looking down the barrel. "I heard all of it, cousin. The furniture heard all of it. It even wrote it down. The room came apart in the space of a breath. The soldier on the left got his weapon halfway up before Lazaro's pistol was level with him. And the man froze, because a barrel that steady, in a hand that calm, is an argument that ends most conversations before they start. Down, Lazaro said, and the weapon hit the floor. The second soldier moved on instinct rather than thought, and his wild aim only punched a hole in the window glass, letting in the cold, wet smell of the gravel and the rain. Pharaoh shouted something and lunged, not at Lazaro, but at Kaya, the witness. Always the witness. The doctor's whole ruined logic, narrowing to the one loose end he might still close. He never reached her. Kala had been waiting for it. She had stood in front of worse men than a soft-handed doctor with a needle, and she did not flinch and she did not freeze. She swung the heavy silver tray up and across his arm with the unhesitating speed of a woman who had learned, long ago, that the only thing fear is good for is feeding the man across from you. The syringe leapt from Pharaoh's fingers, spun once in the candlelight, and shattered against the wall, its contents hissing harmless into the old plaster. Pharaoh stumbled back with a cry, cradling his arm, and Lazaro stepped in and took him down to the floor and held him there, pinned and finished, before the doctor could draw a second breath. The second soldier swung his barrel toward the bed, toward Kala, and for one black instant Lazaro saw the whole thing slipping, saw himself a half-second too slow, the oldest and worst arithmetic of his life, and then the door downstairs came off its hinges with a flat concussive boom. With men in dark coats who belonged to him, they had not been an hour away after all. Anselm, it turned out, had staged them in the woodline beyond the gravel the moment the second car's headlights swept the drive, on a hunch, and 30 years of knowing how these nights go. The word citrus had only told them to come through the door. They came through it like water through a broken dam. The soldier near the window had time for one more wild shot into the ceiling before two of Lazaro's men closed on him and bore him to the ground, weapons stripped away, arms pinned. The one in the doorway dropped his gun, and his knees in the same motion, hands laced behind his head, an old soldier's surrender, fast and total, and it was over. The whole storm of it, in less time than it takes to peel an orange. Not a single person in that room had been seriously harmed. Lazaro had wanted it that way. He had not waited 4 months in the dark to leave a mess on his own floors. He had waited to win. Quiet came back to the room in pieces. The rain at the broken window, the hard breathing of pinned men, the wet, betrayed gasp of Dr. Pharaoh on the floor. And in the doorway, leaning on a cane, his bad hip stiff and his old spine straight as a fireplace poker, stood Anselm Voss, who had never left the family at all, only stepped outside to fetch the cavalry and wait for the right night to use it. "Welcome back, sir," the old steward said, and there was iron under the gentleness of it. Dario had not run. There was nowhere left to run to. He stood against the corrugated gray wall of his own ambition, with his hands half raised, and Lazaro crossed to him slowly, and took him by the collar and put him down, not into the floor, but into the chair. The sheepskin-cushioned invalid's chair, where a dead man was supposed to sit, silent and seeing nothing, for 20 patient years. "Sit," Lazaro said. "You wanted it so badly." Dario sat. He babbled, the way they all do at the end. It was the Sabatinas they had forced him. He had never wanted Lazaro dead, only managed, only protected, the words tumbling out in the shape of every lie a cornered man has ever told, and every syllable of it fell on a face that had gone entirely, terribly still. "You put a bomb under my car," Lazaro said quietly, when the babbling ran dry. "You buried me alive in my own house. You would have let this man stop my breathing in my sleep, and signed a paper to swear it was the injuries that did it." He crouched to his cousin's eye, level the way Kayla had crouched to his, on her second day, with an orange and a kindness he had not earned, and there was no warmth in him at all. "And the one thing none of you counted on, in all your careful arithmetic, was that you would hire a girl to scrub the floors who looked at a broken man and decided he was still worth treating like a person. He turned his head, just slightly, toward where Calla stood over the shattered syringe, breathing hard, the tray still loose in her grip. Magnificent. You handed me the only ally I had left in the world. I almost want to thank you for it. He stood. He did not raise the pistol again. He had decided, somewhere in the long, patient dark of the last 4 months, that he wanted his cousin to live, and to live a very long time. He does not die tonight, Lazaro told his men. Death is what he prepared for me, and I am not in the habit of giving a man the gift he meant to take. Take him to where the accounts are, every shell company he signed, every name he sold me to. He is going to spend what is left of his life, handing it all back in front of the people he borrowed it from, until there is nothing left of him but the debt, a thin, cold smile. And the Sabatinis, who fronted the money to bury me, they are about to receive 4 months of recordings, with a short note. The note will explain that their investment has failed, that the man they paid to put in the ground is asking warmly after their health, and that he knows the names of their accountants too. He turned to Anselm. Take him. They took him. They took Pharaoh white-faced and clutching his arm. They took the surrendered soldier, and the 2 who had been pinned. The cars filled and the gravel hissed, and the rats were carried out of the walls at last, and the house, after 4 long months, fell silent in a way that did not feel like a grave. Lazaro stood in the middle of the wrecked drawing room, alive, seen, standing, the broken window breathing cold rain into the lilies, and turned to find the one person still there. Calla had not run. She had not run at any point in the worst 5 minutes of the night, and she did not run now. She was looking at him, at all of him, the height, and the stillness, and the cold, quiet thing in his eyes that had just taken a room apart without once raising his voice, and he watched her, finally, fully understand what she had spent 2 weeks being kind to. "You're not a broken man at all," she said softly. "No, you're the most dangerous one in the room, yes." He did not look away from her, and some part of you knew it. You knew it, and you sat in that chair and hummed to me anyway. He crossed the floor to her slow, giving her every chance in the world to step back. She did not take a single one. Why, she did not answer right away. She bent, instead, and picked something up off the side table, the chess set, righting a bone pawn that had tipped onto its side in the chaos, and Lazaro watched her hands and understood that she was buying herself a moment, and let her have it. "Because dangerous and worthless aren't the same thing," Calla said at last. "I grew up around dangerous men. Every single one of them was a coward, where it actually counts. The second they believed no one was watching, they took. From the sick, from the weak, from a dying woman who couldn't lift her own head to stop them. She set the pawn upright on its square, and then I came into this house, and I watched the one dangerous man I'd ever met do the opposite. The whole world stopped watching you. Everyone you loved walked out and took your watch and your whiskey and your ring on the way, and there was nothing left to perform for, and you didn't beg, and you didn't break, and you didn't take a thing from anyone. You just sat there in the dark and endured it and waited." She looked up at him. "I didn't know you could see. But I knew you weren't gone. There was somebody home behind those glasses, so I kept the candle lit. The candle stays lit, in case you like it." He had taken it, that first night, for a small kindness. He understood now that it had been a whole sentence, spoken to a man she had no proof could hear it. "And there is something else you should know," she added, and watched his eyebrows lift. "I didn't only guess at the candle. A few days after that, Anselm found me on the back stairs. He had been watching me with you, the oranges, the candle, and the night I walked the doctor down. He told me the rest of it. That the old master was not gone at all, that he could see and hear every word, and that he needed one person inside these walls who could carry a tray and keep a secret, and not lose her nerve when the night finally came." A small, crooked smile. So I was not quite the innocent bystander you thought, Mr. Marchetti. I've known for certain what you were doing these last few days. Known it the way you know a fact, not a feeling. The smile softened into something more honest, and I peeled the oranges anyway. I wanted to know what you would do when there was, finally, something to do. It was the second turn of the knife, and it landed quietly, the way the truest things land. She had not been a victim he rescued, and she had not been an operative who had played him. She had been told the whole truth, handed every reason in the world to keep her head down and her hands clean, and she had chosen, with her eyes fully open, to put her soft, unguarded body between a syndicate and a man, for no reason on earth except that she had decided he was worth standing in front of. The free, unprofitable kindness he had spent his entire life refusing to believe in had been real the whole time. It had only ever been braver than he'd had the imagination to expect. "Renata is gone," he said. "She'll wake tomorrow and find the engagement was a merger of two families that no longer exists, and that the man she chose instead is on his way to spend his life repaying strangers." There was never anything in that wedding but arithmetic. I called it off in my own head the moment I understood it was Dario. She had really chosen. I just hadn't had a mouth to say it with until tonight. What happens to her? He considered it. Once, the old Lazzaro, the one who died under the car, would have known the answer before the question finished. There were quiet, permanent answers for women who helped bury you. He turned the thought over and found, with a faint surprise, that it had lost its grip on him, somewhere, in the last 4 months of being treated like furniture by people who thought no one was keeping score. "Nothing," he said at last. "She showed me exactly who she was the moment she believed I couldn't do anything about it, and now I can, and the most fitting thing I can do is let her live with having shown me. She'll find the accounts she expected to inherit are closed to her. She'll find the name she traded mine for is worthless by morning. She gets to keep her freedom and discover precisely what it's worth." He almost smiled. "Your mother taught you what people are in a room like this. Mine taught me that the cruelest thing you can do to someone who wanted you gone is simply to go on existing, prosperous and unbothered, in full view. Renata will read about me in the society pages for the next 30 years. That is punishment enough." Kala studied him. "That's almost mercy." "It's accounting," he said, "but you're welcome to call it mercy. I'm told I should practice." He stepped closer. "I have spent 4 months in that chair, learning the one thing I never bothered to learn at the head of the table. The difference between the people who surround a man and the one person who actually stays. There is exactly one of the second kind in my entire world. And she is standing in front of me with a chess piece in her hand, having just disarmed a doctor with a serving tray." Kala laughed, a real one. Surprised out of her, the first he had ever heard from her. "I did do that, didn't I?" "You did." He took the pawn gently from her fingers and set it back on the board himself, deliberate, like a man, finally making a move he had waited a very long time to make. "I am not going to insult you by pretending I am a good man. You have seen what I am. You saw all of it tonight, in this room." His voice dropped low. "But I know what I owe, and I have always paid my debts. And you, Calla Wren, are the only debt I have ever wanted to keep owing for the rest of my life." He reached up the same gesture as in the dark, the thumb along the curve of her cheek, except now there was candlelight and a broken window letting in the rain, and nothing left in the world to hide behind. "Your mother's grave, wherever it is, however far, it will be tended every week for as long as I draw breath. Whatever you have been carrying alone all these years, you put it down now. You don't scrub another floor as long as you live. Not mine. Not anyone's." "And what do I do instead?" she asked, very low. "You stay in the room," he said, "with me. As the one person in this entire house I will never once have to wonder about a breath. I lost 20 years building an empire out of people who would put a bomb under my car for a chair at my table. I would burn the whole thing to the ground before I'd lose the single person who lit a candle for the corpse in the corner. Something almost like humor moved at the edge of his mouth. Don't make me prove that. I have only just got the house quiet. Kala looked at him for a long, long moment. At the dangerous man, the dead man risen, the cold king with a thumb gone gentle against her cheek. And then she did the thing she had done every single afternoon for 2 weeks. The small, ordinary thing that had started all of it. She reached over to the bowl on the side table, took an orange, and pressed a single segment into his open palm. "The lilies go," she said, "first thing in the morning. This house has had more than enough funerals." Her fingers closed around his, the orange warm between them. "I'll stay." And Lazzaro Marchetti, who had been buried alive, and had clawed his way back out one patient day at a time, with nothing but a chest set full of confessions and the kindness of a stranger to dig with, closed his hand around hers and the orange both. And for the first time in 4 months, in the candlelight, with the board righted between them, and the rats gone from the walls and the rain washing the gravel clean outside, he let himself be exactly what he was alive, seen, and, impossibly against every cold rule he had ever lived by, chosen. The lilies went out with the morning, as promised. Calla carried the vases down herself, all of them, every white funeral arrangement, in every room, and Lazzaro watched from the top of the sweeping staircase, standing, unhidden, his eyes following her the whole way, as she set them out on the gravel in the gray first light for the bins. The house breathed easier without them. By noon, Anselm had the windows open and the smell of beeswax and lemon polish drifting through the halls again, and a glazier was measuring the bullet-starred drawing-room window, and the chair with the sheepskin cushion had been folded up and carried out to a car bound for the same place as the man who'd hoped to put Lazzaro in it for good. She found him in the study that evening, in the chair behind the great desk, where he was meant to sit, not the one by the window. There was an orange waiting on the blotter, already peeled. The segments fanned out on a plate beside a fresh pot of coffee, black. And the way she had guessed without ever being told, she did not say anything about it. She only lit the candle on the corner of the desk because the overhead lights were ugly, and because, though neither of them said this either, the candle stayed lit now. It was the rule of the house. They told the whole city that Lazzaro Marchetti was finished. They were half right. The man they buried, the one who believed every kindness hides a price, that loyalty is only arithmetic that hasn't yet found its number, that the biggest stone in the case is the same thing as having chosen well. That man did die. He died under the car, along with the cold, transactional version of his life he had been 2 days from marrying into. The thing that stood up out of that wheelchair, 4 months later, was something harder and clearer, and strangely, far more human, than the man who sat down into it. Someone who had finally, at terrible cost, learned the one difference that mattered. Everyone left him. His fiancée, his cousin, his doctor, his soldiers, the cook who spat in his soup and the guard who flicked his ear, every face he had ever trusted or paid or fed, gone over to the other side the very moment they decided he could no longer see them. Everyone except the woman they hired to scrub his floors. The one who narrated the weather to a man she thought was blind. The one who lit a candle for a corpse and called it ugly lighting. The one who hummed at his bedside, the way she had once hummed at her dying mother's, so that whoever was in there would know they were not alone in the dark. The one who put her own body between a needle and a stranger for no reason in the world, except that she had looked at a broken man and decided he was still worth treating like a person. He did not simply survive the people who buried him. He let them dig the grave. He let them climb down into it beside him and confess, every careless word of it, to a chess set that was listening the whole time. And then, on a night of his own choosing, with the one loyal hand in the house pressed into his under the blanket, he stood up and walked out of the grave they'd made, and he took with him the only person who had ever reached down into the dark and found him still there. That is how a man comes back from the dead, not with the gun. The gun was easy, The gun was always going to be there. He came back with the one hand that never let go of his. And here is the part the city never understood. The part Dario never saw coming, with all his careful arithmetic. The empire was never the prize. Lazaro had it back within the week. The ports, the accounts, the men, all of it flowing home. The moment word spread that the dead king was upright and asking after people by name. But an empire is just a thing that surrounds you, and he had learned, the hard and patient way, that the things which surround you will divide your belongings over your head the instant they think you've stopped watching. What he'd been starving for through 20 years at the head of that table was the other thing, the rarer thing. The one person, in a house full of takers, who with the whole world looking away and nothing left to gain, reached down into the dark anyway and lit a candle and stayed. If this story got to you, if you felt it in your chest, the moment he lifted those smoked glass lenses and said hello, Dario, then do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe for more dark, slow burn stories, where the quiet ones turn out to hold all the power, and tell me down in the comments, what was the exact moment you knew Kalia was the only one in that whole house who deserved him? Was it the very first orange, the candle she refused to blow out, the silver tray across the doctor's wrist? Drop it below. I read every single one. I'll see you in the next story.